The night Penny Holbrook walked out of the Ashby estate, the snow was coming down in sheets over Chicago's North Shore. She didn't look back, not at the iron gate, not at the amber light spilling from the study windows, not at the house that had swallowed 2 years of her life one quiet day at a time. She walked into the white dark and disappeared. 22 hours later, Conrad Ashby came home to a ring on his desk and a wife who no longer existed. What happened after that, people in his organization would talk about for a long time. Penny Holbrook had not been born for Conrad Ashby's world. She'd been born in a 2-bedroom apartment in Cicero, Illinois, above a dry cleaner that smelled of chemicals and old cigarettes. Her mother died when Penny was 11. Her father, Ray Holbrook, was a small-time bookie who ran numbers for the Ashby operation out of a sports bar on Cermak Road, a gentleman with a drinking problem and a talent for getting in over his head. When Ray died of a heart attack, he left behind a daughter, a 3-legged dog named Biscuit, and a debt of $430,000 owed to Conrad Ashby's organization. Penny was 24 years old. She weighed 260 pounds. She had soft brown eyes, thick dark hair she kept in a low bun, and hands that were permanently dry from the cleaning chemicals she used 6 days a week as a housekeeper at the Ashby Grand, Conrad's flagship hotel on Michigan Avenue, which was, among other things, a very efficient vehicle for laundering money. The marriage was Conrad's idea, or more precisely, it was the solution his consigliere, a grey-faced man named Aldous, proposed when the debt situation became complicated. Penny's father's obligations didn't die with him, they transferred, and Conrad, who prided himself on clean accounting above everything else, didn't like loose ends. The offer was delivered to Penny on a Tuesday afternoon in the hotel manager's office. She had just finished stripping the beds in 6 rooms on the 14th floor. Her back ached. She sat across from Aldous and listened to him explain, in the tone of a man discussing a lease agreement, that she had 2 choices: marry Conrad Ashby and the debt would be considered settled, or don't, and the collection process would be considerably less comfortable. She asked for 48 hours to think about it. She used 30. The North Shore estate was everything Cicero wasn't: marble floors, a wine cellar, a staff of 9, security cameras in every corner, and a gate that looked like it belonged in front of a European embassy. Conrad Ashby, at 39, moved through it all like a man born to own things. He was tall, with sharp features and dark hair going silver at the temples. He dressed in clothes that cost more than Penny earned in 2 months. He was, by most objective measures, extraordinarily handsome. And he looked at Penny the same way he looked at the furniture, briefly, with mild assessment, and then away. He was not cruel, not in the obvious ways. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten her. He simply did not see her. For 2 years, Penny lived in the East Wing guest suite that had been quietly renovated for her arrival. She ate alone when Conrad wasn't home, which was most evenings. She had access to the library, the garden, the kitchen. She was not a prisoner. She was not a wife either. She was something in between, something with no good word for it. Conrad had a life that didn't include her. Business dinners she wasn't invited to, trips to New York and Miami with his inner circle, and Francesca Del Rey. Francesca was 41, angular, and beautiful in the way that required significant investment and maintenance. She appeared on Conrad's arm at social events when Penny was not expected. She had a laugh like crystal and a gift for making other women feel invisible without technically saying anything wrong. Penny knew about Francesca the way you know about weather. It was simply a condition of the environment, and complaining about it seemed beside the point. The breaking point came on a Friday night in March. The Chicago Children's Hospital held its annual charity gala at the Langham. Conrad was expected to attend, and for reasons of optics, his alliance with Alderman Fitzgerald's office required a show of domestic stability. Penny was expected beside him. She wore a dress she had chosen herself, a deep burgundy wrap style that moved well and fit the soft curves of her body. She wore her hair down, which she rarely did. In the mirror of the East Wing bathroom, she had felt something close to lovely. She should have known better than to walk into a room with Francesca Del Rey in it, feeling lovely. Conrad had arrived at the table first with his enforcer, Rocco, and several men from his circle. Francesca was already seated beside the alderman's wife, wearing something white and merciless. She saw Penny approach and let her eyes travel the full length of her with the particular efficiency of a woman who has spent years measuring competitors and finding them wanting. "Conrad," Francesca said, not quite low enough, picking up her champagne flute. "I thought your wife was coming tonight." She tilted her head. "Is that her?" "I thought she was with the catering staff. The outfit seemed to fit." A ripple of laughter moved through the group. Not everyone, but enough. Penny stopped walking. The blood rushed to her face. She stood in her burgundy dress with her hair down, 5 feet from her husband, and waited. Conrad looked at her. His expression did not change. There was no flicker of anger, no tightening of the jaw, no signal that he was about to say something. He looked at her with the same mild assessment he used for furniture, and then he turned back to the alderman. "Penny," he said, without looking at her again, "go get a drink at the bar. We'll take photos after the program." She got her drink. She stood at the bar for 40 minutes and spoke to no one. When they took the photos, Conrad's hand rested at the small of her back for approximately 3 seconds, and then he moved away. On the drive home, he didn't say a word, neither did she. She found him in the library an hour later. He was at his desk, reviewing something on his screen, his jacket off and his collar open. The room smelled of the expensive scotch he poured every evening at 10. She said that in front of Alderman Fitzgerald. Penny said from the doorway. Said what? Francesca, the comment about the catering staff. Conrad didn't look up. I didn't catch it. She implied I was hired help at a table full of people you do business with. He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned in his chair, crossed one leg over the other, and looked at her with the patience of a man who finds a conversation tedious but will finish it to close the loop. "What would you like me to do about it?" he said. Not a question exactly. "You could have said something. I'm your wife. Francesca's husband sits on the city planning board. Making an enemy of her creates complications I don't need." He picked up his glass. "You understand how this works." "I'm your wife," she said again, her voice steadier than she felt. "You're an arrangement." He set the glass down. He still wasn't angry. That was the thing about Conrad. He didn't get angry at things that didn't matter to him. Anger was a form of caring. "I've been fair to you, Penny. You have a roof. You have more money in your account than you've ever seen in your life. You want for nothing practical. But let's not pretend this is something it isn't." She took a step forward. "Tell me what it is then. Say it plainly." Something shifted behind his eyes. A kind of settling, like a man deciding to stop softening his edges. "You're a settled debt," he said. "That's the truth of it. Your father owed me money. You couldn't pay it. This was the solution." "It was never personal, Penny. You were never personal." He picked up his scotch. "I don't know what you're hoping to hear from me, but you mean nothing to me. I'd rather say that plainly than watch you embarrass yourself expecting something that isn't there." He turned back to his screen. She stood in the doorway of his library and looked at the back of his head. She did not cry. She'd expected to want to. Instead, something happened in the center of her chest, a clean, cold snap, like ice breaking off a larger shelf. What slid in underneath it was not grief, it was clarity. He was right. She meant nothing to him. The question she walked away with was different from the one she'd carried in. Not how do I make him see me, but what does he have that I can use? Here was what Conrad Ashby did not know about the woman he had married. When his regular accountant, a precise man named Felix, spent 6 weeks in the hospital following a cardiac event the previous winter, Conrad had needed someone to manage the clean side of the hotel books. Operational expenses, payroll, vendor invoices, the surface layer, the one that didn't require knowing what was underneath. Penny had been managing the Ashby Grand's housekeeper schedule for 18 months by then. She knew every department head, she knew the filing system. Conrad's operations manager, in a moment of pragmatic desperation, had asked her to step in for Felix. Conrad had signed off without thinking about it. She was, after all, invisible. She was also the daughter of Ray Holbrook, a man who had tracked numbers in his head for 30 years with an instinctive precision that never made it into any formal education, but absolutely got passed down to his daughter. Penny had a memory like a filing cabinet. She noticed patterns, she noticed discrepancies, and over the course of those 6 weeks, she noticed that certain vendor names appeared at irregular intervals with no corresponding services rendered. That cash deposits followed a rhythm that had nothing to do with occupancy rates, that the accounts referenced in the clean books pointed, if you followed them carefully enough, to structures that had nothing to do with a hotel. She had not done anything with that knowledge immediately. She'd simply held it, the way you hold a key when you don't yet know what door it fits. Over the following year, she had been patient. Invisible people have time. She kept her own private record, nothing digital, nothing networked, just a small notebook inside a hollowed-out paperback on her shelf, cross-referenced with dates and account numbers she had confirmed, quietly, over many months. When she walked out of Conrad's library that night, she understood exactly what she held. She spent the next 5 weeks getting ready to use it. Invisible people move through spaces that visible ones cannot. The estate's security watched the perimeter. No one watched Penny. She was the wife who stayed in the East Wing, who read, who went to bed early. She was background noise. She liquidated a savings account her mother had opened for her before she died. $4,000 held at a credit union in Berwyn that had never appeared on any document connected to the Ashby name. She bought a burner phone with cash. She made contact through a careful series of unremarkable afternoons with a document forger working out of a print shop in Pilsen. She bought herself a new name, Anna Webb. She chose her moment carefully. Conrad had a monthly meeting with his financial and legal team, 12 to 14 men, 4 to 6 hours minimum. Rocco would be with him. The estate would run on skeleton staff. Dorothy, the older housekeeper who had been quietly kind to Penny and who asked no questions, was off that day. On the night before, Penny didn't pack a bag. A bag would show intent. She put on dark jeans, boots, and a heavy coat. She went to the study, the one she was theoretically not permitted to enter, and entered it. She had learned the combination to the secondary filing cabinet from watching Conrad open it twice without realizing she was in the room. She removed the external hard drive she knew from a carefully overheard comment between Conrad and Felix contained a physical backup of the real accounts. She left her wedding ring in the center of his desk blotter. She walked out the side door at the far end of the East Wing, through the kitchen garden, and through a gap in the hedge she had identified 8 months ago and verified twice since. A car service paid for in cash through an app was waiting a quarter-mile down the road. Anna Webb was on a bus to Detroit before midnight. By the following evening, she was in a town called Millhaven in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where the nearest city was 2 hours away, and the lake in November looked like hammered pewter, and nobody had ever heard of Conrad Ashby or any of the people who owed him anything. Conrad came home at 7:15 to an estate that felt wrong in a way he could not immediately place. He found the ring first. Afterward, according to Rocco, who had witnessed it and would recount it only once and never again, Conrad picked the ring up and held it in his palm for a long moment without moving. Then he opened every door in the east wing. He checked the closet. He checked the bathroom. He stood in the middle of Penny's room, which smelled faintly of the lotion she used, and stood very still. Then he went to the study. The filing cabinet had been opened. The drive was gone. What happened in the following 20 minutes, no one on the staff spoke about directly. The operations manager was called in the middle of the night. Felix was called. Aldous was called. Conrad, who had not raised his voice in years, who conducted even his most dangerous business with the cold composure of a man who didn't need volume to be frightening, destroyed the study in less than 5 minutes. The desk lamp went through the window. The bookcase came off the wall with his bare hands. He dragged his head of security into the driveway and put him on the ground before Rocco physically pulled him back. He was certain, for the first 3 days, that she had been taken by a rival. It did not occur to him that she had walked out on her own. That thought arrived slowly, like a bruise forming. He was reviewing the security footage for the 6th time when he paused on a single frame from the exterior garden camera, a dark shape, a gap in the hedge, 11:43 p.m. She had left. She had planned it. He sat alone in the wreckage of his study for a very long time. Chicago had a bad month. Conrad leaned on the people he usually left alone. He called in favors that couldn't be recalled. He visited the Battaglia family on the South Side, the Drexel crew in Milwaukee, every associate and corner man who had known Ray Holbrook, pressing each of them with a patience he did not actually feel. He hired a man named Tanner, former intelligence, expensive, methodical, to find her. He stopped sleeping, not insomnia exactly, he simply forgot to go to bed. Rocco, who had worked for Conrad for 11 years and was not given to sentiment, told Aldous privately that it was difficult to be in the same room with him. The composed, ice-cold prince of the North Shore had been replaced by something rawer, something that didn't negotiate with itself anymore. Felix told Aldous, who told no one else, that Conrad had once stopped in the middle of a business meeting. Nothing to do with Penny, nothing related, and asked quietly, "Did she ever say anything to you about being unhappy here?" Felix had said no, because she hadn't said anything to anyone. That seemed to make it worse. He had Francesca Del Rey's number blocked. He sent flowers with a note that said only, "Don't call again." She didn't. He was in her room one evening, the East Wing room that still smelled faintly of her lotion, when Rocco found him sitting on the edge of the bed, not doing anything, just sitting there surrounded by the dresses she had left behind, looking at the indentation on her side of the mattress. Rocco closed the door without saying a word. Millhaven, Michigan, in November, was so cold the air had physical weight. The town sat on a harbor facing north, which meant the wind came off the lake without anything to slow it down, and by Thanksgiving the snow was already permanent. There were 400 and some year-round residents, a gas station, a hardware store, a library open 3 days a week, and a diner called Kettle and Cup, where the coffee was not particularly good, but was hot, and there was always a seat. Penny Anna waited tables there 5 days a week. The owner, a woman named Rosalie, in her 60s, who had inherited the place from her mother, and had no particular interest in the histories of people who came to town looking quiet, had hired her after a 10-minute conversation and a breakfast rush where Anna had helped without being asked. Rosalie paid cash on Fridays and asked no questions. There was a retired schoolteacher named Emmett Greer, who came in most mornings for oatmeal, black coffee, and rye toast, and who had, from the first week, talked to Penny the way almost nobody had in Chicago. Not around her, not past her, directly at her, asking her opinion on things and listening to the answers. He was 63 and had lived in Millhaven his whole life, and thought it was the finest place on earth, which Penny found genuinely moving. She ate what she wanted. She wore big wool sweaters from the thrift shop at the edge of town. She took walks along the harbor in the cold that left her cheeks red and her thoughts clean. She called no one. She connected to nothing. She sat most evenings by the window of her room above the hardware store and watched the ice on the harbor and felt something she had not felt in 2 years. Like she belonged to herself. Tanner found her in February through a thread no reasonable person would have followed. A wire transfer from a small bank account Penny had forgotten existed, tied to an old Berwyn address, cross-referenced with a social security number through a database that was not supposed to be accessible. The thread was thin. Tanner was not the kind of man who left thin threads alone. He reported to Conrad on a Thursday morning. Conrad came himself. He drove 10 hours from Chicago rather than flying. He needed the time. He needed to think through what he was going to do when he got there, and he needed to be honest with himself, somewhere in the middle of Michigan's empty winter highway, about why he was going. It wasn't the hard drive. He had managed the exposure, restructured the accounts, bought the silence he needed. The drive was a loose end he could have managed from a distance. He was going because something had gone wrong inside him in a way he didn't have language for, and it had been living in a diner in the Upper Peninsula, and he had been operating at a deficit for 3 months, and he could not continue like this. The storm came in Saturday afternoon. Penny was wiping down the counter when she heard the bell above the door. She looked up the automatic way you look when a customer comes in. For a moment her eyes didn't process what they were seeing. It was the coat first, black, expensive, completely wrong for Millhaven, then the height, then the face. Conrad Ashby stood inside the doorway of the Kettle and Cup, with the cold coming in behind him, looking at her like a man who has been in the dark for 3 months and just found a window. He looked terrible. The composure that usually lived in his face had been replaced by something open and exposed and almost painful to see. He had lost weight he didn't have to lose. His face was shadowed and drawn. Behind the frost-filmed windows of the diner, 2 black SUVs idled in the parking lot. "Anna," Rosalie called from the kitchen. "You need something out front?" "I've got it," Penny said. Her voice was steady. She was surprised to find that was actually true. The diner had 2 other customers, both locals, both watching now. Penny set her cloth on the counter and walked to the end of it and faced him. "We're closing early for the storm," she said. "You'll need to go." Penny. The way her name came out sounded like something that had been held under pressure for a long time. "My name is Anna. You have my drive." "I have my insurance," she kept her voice level. "The drive's contents are on a server you can't locate. The access key runs on a 72-hour timer that I reset manually. If anything happens to me, if I get in one of those SUVs in the parking lot, if I go quiet, if I stop being able to reset the clock, it triggers an automatic distribution. FBI field office in Chicago, IRS criminal division, the Battaglia family. 3 journalists I have already made contact with." She let that sit. "Do you want me to describe what's on it, or can we skip that?" He stepped closer. The counter was between them. She put both hands flat on the cold formica and held his eyes. "You planned this," he said, not an accusation, something closer to genuine wonder. "For 11 months. While you were in my house. While I was invisible in your house." She held his gaze. "You didn't look at me long enough to notice anything I did. That was your choice." He was quiet for a moment. The storm pressed against the windows. "Come back," he said. "Name any terms. Your own account's full legal protection. Francesca has been gone since the day you left. I'll renegotiate everything from the ground up. I'll have Aldous draft whatever you need in writing tonight. I don't want a renegotiated arrangement, Conrad. A better arrangement is still an arrangement. That's what I had." "Then what?" "I want this." She made a small gesture that took in the diner, the snow, the town beyond the windows. I want to go to sleep without calculating what I'm worth to the room I'm in. I want to eat breakfast without a woman in $1,000 dress, reminding me what I look like while the man who's supposed to be my husband decides he didn't hear it. Her voice dropped, but didn't waver. You told me I was a settled debt, a line item. You said I meant nothing to you. You said it plainly. I was wrong. The words came out rough. I know that's insufficient. I know that's 2 years too late. I'm saying it anyway. She reached under the counter and set a small USB drive on the formica beside the sugar caddy. The server access code is on there, she said. Take it. Retrieve your accounts. Pay whoever you owe. Patch what's bleeding. That's what you came for. Take it and go home. He looked at the drive. He did not reach for it. That isn't what I came for. His voice had gone very quiet. The accounts I've managed. I restructured 3 weeks ago. I came because I haven't slept more than 3 hours at a time in 3 months. I came because I sat in your room in the estate. And I know how that sounds. I know what I am. I sat there surrounded by the dresses you left, and I understood, for the first time, that you had been holding things together I never even noticed. You remembered dates I forgot. You handled staff situations I never knew were problems. You were in every room of that house doing quiet work that I never once acknowledged, because I had decided you weren't worth the attention. A muscle moved in his jaw. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that saying it fixes anything, but you are not nothing. You have never been nothing. I was a fool, and I was cruel, and I am standing here because I don't know what else to do. Penny looked at him. The girl who had sat alone at the bar of the Langham Hotel for 40 minutes, waiting for him to glance over. That girl wanted to believe in what was happening in front of her. She wanted the version of this story where the damage got undone by a man willing to admit he'd caused it. She knew something now that girl hadn't. Damage doesn't get undone. It gets carried, or it gets put down. She had spent 3 months learning to put hers down. She was not going to pick it back up. She was about to speak when Conrad Ashby did something that stopped every thought in her head. He sank to his knees. Not performed, not strategic. The sound his kneecaps made against the diner's linoleum floor was clean and quiet and absolute, and Penny heard it the way you hear something that can't be taken back. The 2 local men at the far table went completely still. Rosalie appeared in the kitchen doorway and didn't move. Conrad looked up at her from the floor. His hands were at his sides. His eyes were dry but desperate in a way she had never seen on his face, had never seen on any face, actually. And what she recognized in it was not a performance of remorse, but the specific look of a man who has burned through every resource he owns and arrived at the last thing he has left, which is the truth. I know I don't deserve to ask, he said. I know what I said to you in that library. I know what I didn't say when Francesca humiliated you in front of my table. I know what I was every single day of those 2 years. His voice cracked at the edges and kept going. But I'm asking anyway. Come home, Penny. Not as a contract. Not as an arrangement. I don't know how to do what I'm asking you to let me do, but I'll figure it out. Whatever you need to tell me, I'll hear it. Whatever you need me to be, I'll work toward it. She looked down at him. The diner was perfectly silent. Get up, Conrad, she said quietly, please. He did, slowly, the way a man gets up when the getting up costs something. She reached under the counter and touched the USB drive. Take this, she said. Save your empire. That's yours, it always was, and I don't want any part of it. She slid it toward him across the counter. But the dead man's switch stays active, permanently. Not because I intend to use it, because I know how your world works. As long as you leave me alone, leave Rosalie alone, leave Emmett alone, leave this town alone. I enter the code every 72 hours without giving it a second thought. You go home. You run your organization. You leave me in peace. That's the deal. He picked up the drive. His hand was not steady. "And if I need to talk to you," he said. "You don't get that." She said it without cruelty. "You don't get to need things from me anymore, Conrad." That window closed. He stood at the counter for a long moment, the drive in his fist, looking at her. Whatever he had expected to find at the end of 10 hours of highway, some version of this conversation that ended differently, was not what he was leaving with. She could see him understanding that. She could see the understanding cost him. He turned toward the door. He stopped. He didn't turn back around. "I'm sorry," he said. Just those 2 words, aimed at the door, no negotiation attached to them, no conditions. "I know," Penny said. He walked out into the snow. She watched through the fogged windows as the 2 black SUVs backed out of the lot and vanished into the white. Then she picked up her cloth and went back to wiping down the counter. Rosalie came out of the kitchen, looked at her for a moment, looked at the empty parking lot, and asked no questions. She poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of Penny, and took the stool at the far end of the counter. Penny wrapped both hands around the mug and looked out at the harbor, where the ice was thick and solid, and the snow was filling in every track, covering every mark, making the surface of the world clean again. She was 26 years old. She had dry hands and a borrowed sweater and a job that paid cash on Fridays. She had rye toast with Emmett in the mornings and the sound of the lake at night and 3 months of sleep that had never once been interrupted by the cold mechanics of a marriage she'd never wanted. She was the most dangerous woman Conrad Ashby had ever looked past. And she was exactly where she wanted to be.